So here we are once again in this very awkward setup.
Yeah, what are you doing? You're freaking me out today already.
Well, this is Courtney's idea, so
it looks good on camera, so
that's all that matters, I guess. If you can't hear me for half of it, then I don't know what to tell you.
Regardless of how uncomfortable Sidney is for this entire
It's really
thing.
uncomfortable. Really uncomfortable.
Do you want to hold hands? All three of us?
All three of us, yeah.
We could have a kumbaya.
We could. Like, do the wave? No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so this was our first attempt, maybe our last attempt with more than two people. We'll see.
You might be the only one. Congratulations.
Hey,
I'm glad it's you.
We got to figure this out.
Yeah.
But we have a very special guest because we want to talk about all things insurance, and I'll go ahead and let him introduce himself.
Hey, everybody. My name is Nathan Mccomsey. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at the Rice Insurance and Financial Group. I have over 10 years of experience, and I'm excited. This is my first podcast, so I'm excited to be here.
Awesome.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, so we were going to do this without Mandy because this was going to be a filler episode because Mandy's too busy for us.
Notice how I'm technically on vacation, and yet here I am.
Well, that's because you had a fear of missing out syndrome.
I did. Yeah. Well, because I'm the one that wanted to talk to you. I was so excited. And he's like, "Oh, I'm interviewing Nate," and I was like, "The hell you are without me."
Yeah. Her schedule cleared up real quick. When I'm like, "Hey, you have time to do a podcast?"
Don't
and
tell
she's
anybody
like,
else though.
Yeah.
My out of office is going to be really confusing
Yeah,
to people after
so,
they see this.
So we wanted to talk about the insurance industry for a couple different reasons. Obviously, can you hear me when I turn my head? Are you sure?
You're good.
I don't believe
You're
you.
doing great.
So I'm so paranoid now. This is so uncomfortable.
Now?
I know. So a few years ago, because I pay attention to things, I started noticing trends in insurance companies as they started moving out of certain states. You know, Florida, California being two of them. I think Texas and Arizona is starting to pick up that trend as well. But one of the things is that in Florida, they do 4-point insurance inspections. Home inspectors do them. They're required by the insurance company. They're ordered by the insurance company, much like an appraisal is by the bank. Mm-hmm. So the inspector doesn't work for the client. They work for the insurance company in that particular thing.
Right.
And they're inspecting HVAC, roof, electrical, and plumbing. And they're not looking for defects. They're just looking for age and what it is, the material. You know, knob and tube wiring, polybutylene, is it copper? How old is the roof? How old is the HVAC? All that stuff. And the other thing I noticed is that insurance companies, once upon a time, especially after a storm went through, like a hailstorm or whatever, you know, roofers would canvass neighborhoods and get all those people to get new roofs because insurance companies would cover the cost of a whole new roof, no matter how old the roof was. Right. And I don't know if you know this or not, but when you wreck your car, they don't buy you a whole brand new car. They prorate the cost of what that car is. Right?
Correct. Yes.
But they've stopped doing that.
Yes.
Now, if you have a 25-year-old roof and it's damaged in a storm, you're going to get a couple thousand. You know?
Not much.
Not
25-year-old roof.
Yeah, not much.
No.
So. And I started talking about this a couple years ago, like, hey, insurance is changing. It's going to happen here, and nobody was listening to me. Even a couple of insurance guys, they're like, nah, I haven't seen anything. And then we started getting phone calls last year for 4-point insurance because people wouldn't. We get those phone calls like, hey, I've been calling around. Nobody knows what a 4-point is. Do you know what it is? And because I pay attention, and one of my guys spent 30 years doing claims investigations for insurance companies. Yeah. He knew what it was. So we were able to knock him out. And it's a couple, that I think Erie started doing it out of Pennsylvania. The North Carolina company started doing them. A couple here and there. And then we started getting a lot of phone calls for roof inspections. Because those letters started going out because of either drive-bys, drones, Google Earth, right? Google Earth says looks like your from the satellite looks like your roof is old. So
Correct.
Either get a letter or replace it, or we're going to drop you. Mm-hmm. So that started happening a lot last year. So you tack on the fact that what was the hurricane that came through? Mm-hmm. That ravaged North Carolina. And then you tack on the wildfires in California. Yeah. And, these are isolated insurance companies. These are nationwide insurance companies.
Right.
So they're hemorrhaging money because of all this stuff. And so now they're trying to crack down on it.
Correct.
So in real estate, it's going to become real interesting. And that's kind of why we wanted you to come in and talk about what you're seeing and what you think's going to happen, as well as all of Mandy's questions. In the Virginia market, when it comes to insurance, getting homeowners insurance, the rates, what is that going to look at?
So it's already started. The last 2 years has progressively gotten stricter when it comes to underwriting guidelines, and the prices have continued to go up because one of the main factors is just like you said, for years, if a storm came through, a roofing company could go into a cul-de-sac or into a neighborhood and door knock and say, your neighbor 3 doors down is getting a brand new roof. I can get you one too.
Yeah.
And the payouts on this they were massive. And so, what we're seeing right now is a lot of carriers are putting an age limit on what they will accept for new business. What I'm seeing a lot, we're a brokerage, so I do have multiple carriers. The roof age is varying between 15 to 20 years old. If it is a 20-year-old roof, they are going to want an inspection. They're going to want photos. They're going to want to make sure that this roof is in great shape because statistically, in the next 5 to 7, you're going to have a new roof. And they want to make sure that they're not going to be on the hook for it anymore. Like you were mentioning, 20-year-old roof, and then something comes through. They used to just pay for a completely brand new one. Now they're going to break that down, and they're going to look at, okay, what is this roof worth on a year by year? We're not covering wear and tear. So the first 15 years of that roof's wear and tear is not going to be covered. And then you have this, say it's hail come through and it's taking it over the edge. You may get 25, 20, 15% of the cost of a brand new roof now in those kind of scenarios. Where I'm seeing with new purchases, I've had to go back to a couple loan officers and say, I can't touch this unless they're going to put a roof on it. It's getting harder for insurance agents to be able to get an accurate quote because the information we're giving from the listing and such, either they know it's old, so they're not going to tell us, or it's going to say as is, which is terrifying to everybody. And then they'll show us some pictures. We might get one satellite if we're lucky, to look over the roof and kind of see if there's granular loss or if there's staining. So it's never been this restrictive in my career. And so it's, we're just kind of learning as it goes.
Do you see in our area or state, do you see insurance companies in the near future starting to require either a 4-point, a version of a 4-point, or requesting the actual inspection report
Absolutely.
during a transaction?
Yeah. I have companies right now that, depending on the age of the home, they give the option to the client to do a mobile inspection. And so what they'll do is they will give the client a detailed breakdown of what photos they have to submit and or videos and upload them so then somebody can take a look at them and make sure that everything's in good standing. But it could absolutely get to a point where, because those are the biggest things in home insurance or that could go wrong. Polybutylene piping just melts away. And they, as an insurance carrier, deserve to know the right. They have to know that before they insure a home. That it's going to happen eventually. So I do believe we're going to end up going that way, and it's going to help both sides because it's going to be able to get the client a little bit of a lower premium because they're going to associate discounts with the upgrades. And then it's also going to give a little bit more security on the carrier side because they're cutting down a little bit on the risks.
Yeah, because up until now, or recently anyways, like polybutylene piping or a certain type of electrical wiring.
Knob and tube,
right? In Florida, they don't like the cloth sheath wiring from the 40s, 50s, 60s, right? Yeah. But it was always, don't commit insurance fraud and lie, but also don't offer up information either, right? So if you have polybutylene piping, if it leaks, they're going to tell you to replace it all, right?
Correct.
out the gate, don't offer up the information. But like I said, that's where we get into the situation we're in.
Correct.
And it, surprisingly, it took this long, honestly. But just to the point where the insurance companies are just getting tired of, everybody knew, they just didn't offer up the information because they didn't ask the questions. Right.
Correct. And so there's been some things that have been put in procedurally to make sure that stuff doesn't happen anymore, which you get agents that are trained that know how to ask the right questions when they're talking to either, the LO or the real estate agent or the client. Mm-hmm. And then the carriers themselves, these are questions that we have to answer as agents. Right. And so now it's actually on the contract that the homeowner signs, stating, the polybutylene question is there in black and white now. Do you have polybutylene, depending on the age of the home? Right. So if they say no on that, it really could open up a space to where a claim could be completely denied.
Sure.
Because of misrepresentation.
Yeah, especially if we found out they had a home inspection. Because as I've often said, our reports are legal documents. Yes. And they can be subpoenaed, and insurance companies have no problem fighting that.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
And there's nothing you can do, correct? If they come at you asking for a copy of the home inspection, you can't say no, correct?
As long as they have a subpoena.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then it's like, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting from my perspective. Like, a lot of people talk to me all the time about a crash that's coming, right? And we've been hearing that forever and ever. And I certainly don't feel like a crash in the way that it's happened in the past is going to be recreated again because of the safety guards that have been put in place. But I do see the potential for risk within the housing market because of some of the things that insurance companies are doing as far as jacking up the premiums and making it more and more expensive for folks to actually stay in their home. And it's affecting their ability to afford their homes. And from my perspective, a lot of what I've seen, especially in the last year or so, is the roofs is a huge, huge issue where people are getting, a company is willing to sign off on their policy, but then as soon as they've closed, they'll go and they'll get slapped with a letter that's like, hey, your roof's too old. We need you to either replace it or we're going to drop your coverage. And that's a huge deal for a lot of people when you've just closed on your home and you thought everything was fine. And then all of a sudden you have to put a new roof on. You're like, wait, what? Hold on. What?
Absolutely. Especially for a first time home buyer. Mm-hmm. Like I remember when, me and my partner bought our first home, we were like just waiting for the bright light at the end of the tunnel because, it's terrifying and there's a lot of moving parts. It's one of the biggest investments that you will ever have in your entire life.
For most, it's the largest
you will ever have. Correct. Yeah. And with insurance, we have to remember that that's protecting that.
Right.
And so we've come to a place in the industry now where I would say probably 95% of all policies written are getting an inspection. Mm-hmm. Like they want eyes on the ground. Now, whether that's through a third-party vendor, whether that's through, inspectors that work directly for the carriers, it's happening. Some carriers have invested in technology where I can see 2 aerial photos of the house within 1 year. So they give me fall and they give me summer. So I can see overhanging trees. I can see that kind of stuff because they're now seeing that, you think, my house was built in the 80s. We have huge trees. Yeah. That one of them big limbs come through somebody's house. Mm-hmm. Especially like with all the ice and stuff that we just had.
And those windstorms.
They were dropping in my backyard. Luckily didn't hit anything. Right. Mm-hmm. But this is another way that the insurance is trying to mitigate some risks. Mm-hmm. Off of their plate is by using the technology.
Yeah. And something else that I saw last year that was the first time in my almost 8 years of doing this full time. Like I had a couple, they referred to me from another agent, but right before they were getting their insurance policy lined up, just kind of before closing, like people do, you're usually within that like 2 to 3 week window from your closing. And the husband reached out to me and he goes, hey, Mandy, the insurance company wants to know if there's impact resistant shingles on the roof.
We get that question.
And sometimes. I said, all right, well, my background is custom home building and a lot of what I do is building. And so I was like, well, knowing that neighborhood and knowing that they were primarily spec homes or production builds, probably not, but let me reach out and see what I can figure out.
Right.
So come to find out, they are impact resistant, but they're a level 2. Apparently there's 4 levels to impact resistant shingles. And apparently the insurance company, even if it is labeled as an impact resistant shingle, if it's not a level 4, the insurance company will not consider it as an impact resistant shingle. And so their premium went way up because of that. Wow. And luckily they were fine, but he was like, that's so annoying. Like, it is an impact resistant shingle. You asked me if it was impact resistant. I said yes. You said what level, and apparently it has to be a level 4.
Yeah.
And so, and that's on a house that was a 2019 build. So it's really not an old roof by any means, but you know, we have had storms that have come through where, you know, there's tree branches and lots of wind and lots of ice and then lots of rain. So I do agree with you. I think it makes sense to protect your investment and to protect it well. But I think one of the things that I cannot emphasize enough as your agent is to have an insurance agent that you really understand, that will work with you to make sure that you have the coverage that you need. Another thing that I saw a lot of, which breaks my heart, is people are underinsured, especially with how high the cost of homes has gone.
Yes.
They've just been thinking like, okay, well, I bought my house for $200,000. And so they have a policy somewhere in there. And then if you have a total loss, like I've seen so many people who have had fires in their homes and they don't have enough money to rebuild where the cost of build is now. And so that's one of the things that I touch base with my clients a lot is like, you need to check in with your agent to make sure that you have enough coverage for your home. Because if you're underinsured, I see it all the time. And it's so sad.
It's 100%. I mean, that's why I always recommend going with a local agent or brokerage versus a 1-800 number.
Yes.
Because a 1-800 number is going to give you what they think you need, and then they're going to get you on. And it's generally about a price point on a 1-800 number kind of call.
Yeah.
But when you have a local agent that you can go and sit down in front of, or however you like to communicate, and they can break it down and explain it to you, I mean, it's a win-win. That's why I'm in insurance, is education.
Yes.
Because you don't know what you don't know. And in my line of business, that happens when it's too late.
Yes.
And you know, when we are quoting up front, especially like again with new home buyers, it's glazed over.
Right.
Like,
they're just trying to check the box so they can close.
So
they have no idea.
Correct.
Like this matters. Listen up.
Yeah. Their LO said we need it under this dollar point a month. And, you know, this is where we're going to be. Now, most policies that are written today have what we call expanded replacement cost. So coverage A on a homeowner's policy is what the carrier is willing to pay for the ground up. So for easy math, we'll stick with the $200,000. Expanded replacement cost comes in at either $125, $150, $200, or guaranteed. We'll go with the $150 because that's what's general right now in a lot of policies. If that house burnt down to the ground, the max payout you would get with 150% expanded replacement cost would be $300,000 because it's giving you that extra 50% of that coverage A, which is supposed to protect you for inflation and you know, labor going up and materials going up. But if you are underinsured from the get-go, that expanded replacement cost is only going to take you so far. You know, and people don't, you know, and they're just like you said, I bought the house for $200. Well, just because you bought it for $200 doesn't mean that's what it's going to cost today if we rebuilt this bad boy from the ground up.
And I don't think people who are not in this world, like if you bought your house and you've been living in it for 10 years, you have no idea what the cost of building is right now. And so it's like, this happened to my neighbors. They're 2 doors down. They're a little elderly couple, and I'd never met them prior to this, but their house, I mean, it burned to a crisp. Like it caught on fire, and in a matter of, I timed it from when we called 911 to when they showed up. It was like 8 minutes, but the thing was gone, all of it, every last bit. And, you know, I was talking with her, and they're going to rebuild, but she was like, I had no idea it is so expensive to rebuild this house. Like they had a tiny little rancher, you know, and she's like, how the heck is it $400,000 to build me a new house? She's like, we built it for $116. And I'm like, oh baby, like,
don't you wish?
But like that is the reality. And I think it's one of those things that it's not on your radar until it's on your radar. And then you wish that you would have kept up with it. And I think that's the beauty of having somebody local too, is somebody who's going to remind you like, hey, here's what's going on. Or even, so our insurance agent is a friend of my husband's, but when all of this went down, we reached out to him and he was like, well, actually, your house, your policy, they canceled us because the back deck of our house doesn't have rails on it. But the thing is like this far off the ground. I'm not kidding. And it's not even a real deck. It's a floating deck. It's not attached to the house at all. It's just like a pad out there. But it was a little tiny insurance company, and they're looking just to get people off the books. And so they came up with this reason to drop us. And I was like, it's not even a real deck. And they were like, sorry, you got to go. So we found someone new, and it ended up actually working out and being cheaper. But I think that's the benefit to working with somebody who can reach out to you and say, hey, look, you've seen some changes here. Or here's a policy that's actually a stronger policy for you. And here's what the difference is. And it may even save you money.
Oh, 100%.
Don't just book something and keep going.
And let it roll. No, you need to take a look at it every couple years.
Yep.
Because as you grow, your needs change and grow.
Yep.
And, you could have gotten engaged. Well, where's that wedding, that ring being insured at?
Yep.
Or you got married. Now we're having kids. Like, are we protecting everything we need? Do we have more personal property now than we did before?
Are you doing renovations? That's a big one that I see. People will go in, they'll buy their new house, they fix it up, it's so beautiful. And I'm like, honey, you just put a $50,000 kitchen in there. Like, what are you doing?
Correct. All those appliances.
Yeah.
I had a remediation company tell me that it was a house fire, and they had built a addition on the back of the house. Oh, no. Never got permits.
Ooh.
Never updated the insurance.
You gotta get permits?
What a bummer.
I mean, I guess so.
Allegedly.
Yeah. And so with that added square footage, they barely were able to rebuild.
Wow.
Barely.
Yeah.
That expanded replacement cost barely covered. And what they ended up doing is they ended up doing itemized replacement on their personal property instead of just the lump number that the policy offers to be able to get extra money to help rebuild.
Yeah. And that right there is one of my favorite things that I like. I would adore working with you for this, and I think clients need you for this, is to explain, like, what does this policy mean? Like, I feel like whether it's medical insurance or home insurance or car insurance, like, it's such a, like, for me, like, when it comes to my medical, I had an emergency surgery. I have no idea what my medical coverage is. It doesn't make any sense. I'm like, wait, what? Like, okay, and so, and you don't care about it until something happens, and then you're like, oh, crap, wait, what?
Yeah.
So to have somebody walking you through, like, this is what you're going to pay, would be very helpful to actually know before you need to know what's going on.
Or before you're rushing a kid into emergency surgery.
Yeah, and like what's going to be expected of you. And I think it would eliminate a lot of, there's already so much grief and headaches and red tape when something happens, when a big life event happens, especially with your home. But to have known ahead of time, or to have somebody local to call that's like, hey, crap, my house just burned down, or I have a flood. Yeah. What do I do? Like, that is the importance, because if you call a 1-800, what the heck are they going to do?
Well, and you're going to talk to a different person every time.
Yeah.
And, in that site, the more you know, I feel like the more you're empowered, and I think the less anxious that you're going to be able to be. You're going to be able to have, things lined up, like, okay, this is all going, like it should, the flow, all of that. Yeah. I actually just assisted a client yesterday, and I've been talking to her a couple of days. She was rear-ended by another person. So we didn't file a claim for her, but she has called me every day to say, okay, this is what they're doing now. Is this right? Are we on? And I'm like, yeah, this is how it flows. This is how it should be. Yeah. She's in her late 40s and it's her first accident.
Yeah.
She has no idea. Mm-hmm. And so, she's asking me about gap coverage and, and it's, and, just talking about different things. So she's learning a lot. She's super thankful for it, but this isn't the time to learn about it.
Yeah.
And I'm, I didn't write the policy, but I was just assisting. But like, she's expressed so much gratitude.
Oh, I'm sure.
She's like, thank you so much for holding my hand. This has been very overwhelming. And I'm like, well, that's why you're with us. That's why you have.
That must be nice.
I love that. There's not a lot of.
I got a hit and run accident, and it was the most frustrating experience that I've ever had. Yeah. Like, in the policy that I had, I was supposed to get a rental car, but I'm not old enough to get a rental car, so I didn't really want to deal with that. So I just didn't do it. But they never
nobody held your hand. Yeah.
No. First off, they wanted me to pay the $500, even though I told them in the beginning that it was a hit and run, and in Virginia it's $200.
Yes.
And I found that out because of my mechanic. And the only reason that I found that out through them is because I told them, like, I don't want to pay the $500. Like, that's like a lot, but not like, you know, and they were like, you shouldn't be paying that. And I'm like, well, what do you mean?
Yeah.
So the fact that they didn't tell me that, nor did they were wanting me to get the police report. They were like, oh, well, you can go down and get it. So then I'm calling up the station. The station's acting like I'm crazy for wanting to get this police report for my insurance. They're like, no, they'll get it. But like, they're like, you have to pay if you want that report. And I was like, oh, I ain't paying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was just so frustrating. My car was done and ready 2 weeks before I could, because they were like, oh, you can go pick it up, pay the $500 and we'll refund you. And I was like, I don't trust you to do that. I don't trust you to get me my money back. So no, I'm going to wait until you say it's only $200.
Yeah. And I think there's a common misconception that using somebody local or, a smaller agency means that they're going to be more expensive. Like I see that a ton where people are like, well, I'm just going to call Progressive or Geico or whatever. And I'm like, no, you're not. You're going to call me because it's like, fine, shop around. And I think you should do your due diligence. But when these things happen, you want somebody who's actually going to get on the phone and hold your hand, because otherwise nothing's going to get done. It's a pain in the neck. And then you're sitting here being like, I don't even know what I'm doing. I've never gone through this, whether you're 20 or 40.
Right.
Like, it doesn't
Nobody
matter.
was advocating for her in this instance.
Yeah.
She had to figure it out on her own.
Mm-hmm. And that was so frustrating. In my head, I'm like, why am I paying for this?
Yeah. Right.
Why am I paying for this when I'm still having to do all of your work?
And I don't have a car to drive right now.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think, like, to your point, whether it's your vehicle or your home, like, those are big assets for you. Like, especially, in our work, like, I need my car.
Oh, yeah.
You need a car these days. And so to get in that situation and then not know where to turn, or to look back on it and be like, man, I thought they were going to be so much cheaper and turns out they weren't. Like, that was where I was surprised, is when I switched from those big box carriers down to somebody local. I thought it was going to be so much more expensive. It actually saved me money.
Yeah.
And in some instances, I've seen clients where they end up with quotes and it's like $5 more, but I'm like, trust me, you want somebody local. Like, you want somebody who's going to be there for you.
Yeah. And at my brokerage, we're lucky we have some of the bigger names.
Yeah.
So, it is, some people find solace in those big names because they've seen the commercials and such. But I joke, I'm like, this company didn't have to pay $30 million for a jingle, for us, somebody to sing a jingle or make some animation for a funny little commercial.
Gecko up on here.
Like if you're happy paying for that, then that's fine. But
yeah, no, I would agree.
So what do you think is going to happen when it comes to the insurance companies? So Florida, California, like we said, they're leaving the states.
Yeah.
When the wildfires happened, you heard stories of people say they got hit with $18,000, $20,000 homeowners policies that they canceled because they couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
And then the fires happened, and now their house is gone. Yeah. They don't have any insurance at all.
Correct.
I think there's going to be a government-backed insurance program.
There already is.
Yeah.
In Virginia, it's a Virginia Property Insurance Association. Okay. And I do believe that it's in every state. And I think that's who sent the $18,000 letters, was the state saying, we will insure it, but this is how much it's going to be. And they were like, no way.
Okay.
I think. I could be wrong.
Right.
I do know.
They never said who the insurance carriers were.
Right. I do know one big one pulled out. And it was very publicized. And it's, if they're not profitable in the state, they're going to pull out of it. And we've seen it. There's been carriers that have pulled out of Virginia or certain regions of Virginia. We're lucky that we don't, in this area, have that much crazy weather. But in Virginia, what we find is there's no back deck on a property. There's a really bad roof. We have to be able to offer them insurance.
Yes.
Now, whether it's decent insurance or affordable insurance is another question.
Yeah.
But VPIA is here in the state, and that's where you go when everybody else tells you no.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yep. And so we, any agent in the state is appointed with them. I have written VPIA policies because we had another reason is loss history. A lot of standard carriers on a home are not going to take more than 2 claims in 5 years. And so if you have that, we won't have anywhere to place you. We have to put you with VPIA until they fall off. And then we can put you back with a normal carrier. A lot of people think insurance is there for every little nick and scratch and bump. It's there for, extreme hazardous, catastrophic.
Yeah.
That's what you think of. That's what you should be thinking of for your insurance.
Right.
And so, another way that carriers are switching up, they're going to percentage deductibles for roofs now.
Yep.
More and more than I've ever seen. And what that means is if you've got coverage A on the home of $3,000 and you have a 1% wind and hail, you now have a $3,000 deductible. Or if it's 2%, you have a $6,000 deductible.
Right.
So where you now have a lot more skin in the game when you go to try to file for that roof claim.
Right. Right.
I had one client, they're an elderly couple, but they told me that every time the power would go out, they would file a claim for homeowners to replace the food in their fridge and freezers. And I was like, I highly recommend you stop doing that. That's maybe not the thing you want to be doing.
Yeah, I've dodged some of those.
That's so crazy to me. I'm trying not to involve my homeowners in anything until I need your help.
I've heard people
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I during the big when Powhatan lost power for a couple of days during the snowstorm, we had a couple of those calls, and I was like, listen. It doesn't even really meet your deductible. I understand it sucks, and eggs are $14 a carton right now.
Right.
But you got to bite the bullet on this
might
one.
not be in your best interest.
Please don't. And once you educate them and they realize that, this is going to be on my record for 5 years, and what if next year something really bad happens? Now I'm going to have 2 and 5. And so
So, okay, my question is, let's say I'm representing a buyer and we're going in and the roof is old, but it's not actively leaking, but there is some damage and we've replaced the damaged shingles or, the sellers agreed to do that. We have all the receipts for that. What's the best way to handle that? Do you let your insurance company know?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Here is the receipts of everything that's been done. There's no active leaks. There's no nothing. Here's what was damaged. It's been fixed by a qualified, licensed, insured roofer. That's the best way.
Shoot me
to
over some
please
photos.
everybody.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That way the carrier knows that any previous damage has been taken care of. Updates have been done on the roof in the home, and everything looks good. We do have some carriers that will take the word off of the Zillow and the listings, especially if it's clearly the home was built in 1950 and there's a beautiful, arch shingle roof on, and we know that it's had to been done. But yeah, so I, for instance, I have a client that's getting ready to purchase a new home, and the roof was put on in 21. And he went to the sellers and got the invoice and the paid receipt and sent it to me, and I was able to get it approved and then get him that discount as well.
I think that's great advice too for anybody who is purchasing a home, because the reality is even in MLS and at the bottom, if you scroll all the way down to the fine print in Virginia, it says all information is deemed reliable but not guaranteed.
Right.
And so to go off of an MLS, if you're searching, especially for all my cuties who are trying to be unrepresented right now, if you're going to do that, strongly don't think you should, but if you're going to, I would get all of your receipts, because if you're looking at, a listing that's saying newer roof, I love when they say that. And you don't know, what is newer, baby? What does that mean? What's newer to you?
Right. That could be 10, 15.
Right.
Who knows? You say newer roof to me, I'm thinking 10 years or under.
Right. Yeah.
But that could be something completely different to somebody else. And then you go have an inspector go out there and they say it's a 15-year-old roof. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not newer.
Well, and from a listing standpoint, all information is deemed reliable but not guaranteed. I'm not a roofer. I don't know. So I could put whatever I want in there.
Yeah.
If somebody tells me, if a seller is oh, we had the roof replaced in 2019, and then I go ahead and put it in there with no receipts or no nothing, and then you're operating as if your roof was put in 2019.
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
I mean, I think it's great advice for sellers and for buyers, because if you have had that done, have your documents ready.
Yes.
It's going to make the buyer purchase a lot easier, especially if it's an older home. And anybody that's going to purchase that home, their insurance is going to want to know. So it's in your best interest. I mean, you don't want an offer to fall through because you don't have documents proving when you put the roof on.
So that leads me to another question.
Uh-oh.
So this wasn't my clients. This was one of my students. They came to me and they were like, Mandy, what the hell do I do? Okay. So their clients had their deck, it fell. The whole support system underneath it fell. And it fell with people on it. And so luckily nobody got like seriously injured. Everything's okay. But come to find out, when they purchased the home, they were not his clients when they purchased it, but permits were never pulled for the construction of that deck. And so that's my other advice to people is you better make dang sure, especially all these cute little flips that go up. You better make sure that the permits were pulled, that it was done correctly. Or there was one where the sellers had agreed to do some work to the house, and I looked up the contractor and their license was non-active. And so they were like, oh, here's the paid receipts and invoices for, the contractor that did the work. And I was like, that's all fine and good, but this person doesn't have an active contractor license. And our agreement says that they will be a licensed and insured contractor, and they're not actively licensed. And so, when I say don't go into things unrepresented, this would be why, because who's checking on this for you? Are you crossing your T's and dotting the I's? Because when your deck crumbles and then you're trying to make a claim and come to find out it was never permitted in the first place.
That's scary. I mean, just think emergency surgery, what it is to walk into an ER right now. Mm-hmm. How much? Mm-hmm. Now times that by 5 people, 10 people on your back deck, and now say they actually seriously get hurt.
Right.
Who's paying for that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Because if the insurance carrier can figure out that was not done legit,
right,
they're not going to take responsibility for that. Mm-hmm. That's why when we were in the pandemic and, you would have 90 offers on one home. Yep. And they're waving everything in the kitchen sink.
Yep.
I could not believe people were waiving inspections.
Oh, yeah.
I could not believe it. Mm-hmm. Like, as we talked about earlier, it's the biggest investment of your life. Mm-hmm. Why would you not, even if it's for your own mind, not even like,
not even for the insurance.
Not even for the insurance, not even to ask
it's your name on the loan, baby. Like, you're gonna sign documents that you are responsible for paying back hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you're not going to make sure that that's a sound investment. I always tell them, just go scroll through Sidney's Instagram for a hot second and then decide if you want to waive your home inspection.
I mean, there's just no other way to scare them.
Yeah. Yep. Because it's like, oh, look, a swimming pool and somebody's crawl space. Like, I always tell people, crawl spaces are where dreams go to die. Like, just go hang out in one of those for a minute.
I will never.
Yeah.
The amount of stories that I feel like every time we have our monthly meeting, everybody will be talking about the next worst thing that they've seen in a crawl space, and I keep telling them every single time that they talk about a crawl space, the price to get me in one, and I'm not even talking about a junky one. I'm talking about one that's already has the plastic down.
The vapor barrier.
I can stand up and walk in.
Brand new build.
Even one of those, it'll cost a couple thousand to get me in there.
I know. How many times do you see a pretty one? Never.
Those are the ones that we take it the longest in because we just appreciate it so much.
I know. You're just having a Lunchable down there. Like, wow, this is nice.
Right.
Yeah.
Is this all that you do right here?
Okay. Yeah, exactly. No, I agree with you. I think it really can turn into a situation where it gets so scary. And I don't tell my clients this to scare the crap out of you, but I tell you this because it is a big decision.
Oh, yeah.
And there is a lot of financial liability here. And obviously, working behind the scenes, we see a lot of the horror stories, and it's the last thing that I want to slap my name on is, I look at the agents who tell their clients well, the only way to get a house in this market is to waive your inspection. And I'm like, no, it's not.
No.
For the record, fire them. No. It drives me insane. And I wish that there was I'm so excited that you're here because the opportunity to give them a resource of, hey, there are people out here who are going to help you and who are going to explain something that's really complicated. Yeah. It is really intimidating. I've been doing this job for 8 years full time. You think I know anything about anything when it comes to homeowners insurance?
Yeah.
Not really, because it's not my lane.
Right.
That's why I have help. That's why I have somebody whose job it is to do this thing.
That loves to talk about it. Because I'm telling you, nobody loves to talk about insurance. And I love it. Yeah. The more I feel like I talk about it, the more I feel like people understand and the more that they're empowered. And that's just my biggest thing.
Yeah.
Whether you're a renter and we need to make sure that your personal property is covered or you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And you have to have it.
Mm-hmm.
legally.
Yeah.
So we might as well have a little bit of understanding on it.
Yeah.
You know.
You actually just reminded me of another one. So throughout the height of the market and even now, we're starting to see leaseback agreements come through, which is where the seller, buyer will buy the home. They become technically the new homeowners, but it's a seller possession. So they get to stay in the home for a certain amount of time.
Yep.
But what I see a lot is agents don't realize that your seller just became a renter. They don't own the home anymore. And so if you're not having them set up a renter's policy and then something goes wrong, who's paying for this?
And your
because
buyer,
technically your buyer's the homeowner now and already has a policy in place. So can you have two homeowners insurance policies on the same property?
No, because you can't have two owners.
Exactly.
Well, you can have husband. You can have two owners,
but
not,
you can't have two separate parties
No.
with two separate homeowners policies, or one who doesn't even have a homeowners policy and one that does but doesn't live there.
No.
That it creates such a nightmare.
And technically, they gave us some grace during COVID, but that grace is gone now.
Yeah.
Your buyer is not just a homeowner, they're now a landlord.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a completely different policy.
Uh-huh.
So if that's the case, you're like, I would need to know that, because then I'm going to have to issue out a landlord policy for 30, 60, 90, however long the rent back is.
Mm-hmm.
B, we need to make sure that seller has a renter's policy to cover any liability.
Yep.
So it doesn't come back to the new landlord buyer.
Yep.
And then when they move out, we then have to transition you from a landlord policy to a homeowner's policy.
Yep.
Because now, and the biggest difference between landlord and homeowners is the amount of personal property.
Yep.
Because you have to think, when you're a landlord, you have your appliances in there, and generally that's about it.
Mm-hmm.
When you're a homeowner, your whole life is in there.
Yeah. Yes.
So, imagine not communicating, moving back into the home, having minimum personal property coverage, and something happens and you have $10,000, $15,000 where you would have generally had hundreds of thousands on a homeowner for your personal property.
Yep, that's a big one that I see. And unfortunately, from my perspective, our leaseback agreement doesn't mention this at all. So I have to go in as the agent and write in who is responsible for what, when the policy will be in place, who's going to be paying for it, for the duration of it, who's covering utilities. Like, these are all things that if your agent is untrained,
they don't know.
They don't put it in there. No. And then you're completely unprotected and everything's fine until it's not fine. And then it's all of a sudden, who's covering
like
this?
so much extra work.
It is so much extra work. So when people tell me that I'm overpaid, I'm like, okay, because what happens when you have two homeowner parties?
Yeah.
Then what?
Luckily, it's not happening as much as it did.
Yeah.
During COVID, people were giving people grace and with just getting stuff together and getting moved and all of that. It took all of us a minute to get used to it, because there was a lot of moving parts in that. And a lot of the carriers would want a copy of the renter policy. So if you didn't represent the sellers and the buyers, it was another party that you had to get involved. I have not seen that much. I don't think I've, maybe once or twice this past year. So luckily that's kind of calmed down, because
Well, what I see from my end is agents don't know to do it. And so that's what scares me, is that you had such an influx of brand new agents throughout the height of the market, and there was that grace period. So now agents don't think, oh, I need to write all of this in. I need to make sure that all of this is in to protect my client. And so unfortunately, I think you're not seeing it when those leasebacks are actually still very much in play. They are just written completely wrong. They do not have the protections in place.
Yeah, I feel like nobody does that.
They don't. They don't.
That's terrifying.
When I teach class on it,
really
agents are like, I would have never thought about that. And I'm like, ooh, okay, well, you're going to think about it now, right?
But if it was their house, they would think about it.
They would sure think about it. Mm-hmm.
If they had somebody else living in their home that they just purchased as their investment or new home or whatever, they're going to want to make sure that property is protected.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Especially when you think about it and sellers are saying, if you have multiple offers, like this is happening on my house right now. And I had multiple offers. And so the purchasers are giving me completely free leaseback agreements, right? The whole thing is free. But then if I wouldn't have spelled this out, I'm like, you're welcome. Like, their agent sent it over. Completely free leaseback, nothing in there. I went ahead and put it in there because I was like, that's a headache I don't want to deal with.
Right.
But, I mean, that's crazy. To have agents that have 20 plus years of experience and they don't even know to write that in. And I'm like, okay, well, we're going to put this in here to protect me as much as it's going to protect your client too. And you're welcome.
Yeah.
But that is one of the things that I think is really scary. And another question I have for you that I didn't think about until I was like 6 years into my career. So when a home is opening up for showings, or this happened recently, I don't think it was here locally. I want to say it was like Texas or something, but they did an open house and somebody accidentally, there was a candle. The agent left the candle burning after the open house and it burned down the house. So my question is like, okay, when we're doing open houses and we're opening up a property to the public for just any old Joe Schmo to go in, or we're opening up a property for showings and everybody and their pet fish gets to come in and the kids are bouncing on everything or flying off the decks or, you know, whatever, leaning over the edge of the swimming pool. Like how does that work in the land of insurance? Is there something that I should be doing as the agent?
Don't let them dangle over the side of the pool.
Right. But it's like, you think about it, like these showings, they're not accompanied by the seller or oftentimes even the listing agent. Right. And so you're just opening it up to all these people and praying to God that they don't do anything weird.
Correct. 100%. And really, I mean, be mindful of candles.
Yeah, right.
You know, but because the ownership is not changing, the liability on the insurance policy is going to cover anything happens on the property. You know, that would be my biggest worry, is somebody missing a step or there's a crack or something and, you know, they fall and get hurt and the owner knew about it but didn't fix it and could be held liable. Like that would be the part that scares me. A candle and
and that's just a freak situation,
right? Oh, yeah.
But like, what a bummer, because then the homeowner's looking at the agent being like, you're serious? Like, you burned my house down. Not only did you not sell it, you burned it down.
It to the ground, yeah. Okay, realtors do warmers. Let's get into warmers.
Yeah, let's get a diffuser instead.
Yeah,
like
no
just a
open
diffuser.
Flames. Yeah. Hit it with some Febreze. It'll be all right. I mean, that's what I think would happen. I've never in my years come across that case. Yeah. I hope I don't ever come across that case.
But it's one of those things that you don't think about it until it's happening. And then you're like, oh gosh. Or I think too, you had these situations where, you know, you'll go in to do the home inspection, the seller's giving you permission, and then all of a sudden their house is flooding, and they didn't tell anybody that their house is flooding, and they're like, Sidney, you flooded my house. And you're like, no, you flooded your house. And it turns into a whole thing.
You flooded somebody's house?
Yeah, allegedly.
A couple times.
It's the jetted tub thing, right? Mm-hmm. Because in the early 2000s, everybody wanted a jetted tub. Okay. And then they never used a jetted tub. And then 20 years later, we come along, and everything's dry rotted, and we have to fill the tub up to test the jets, because otherwise you can damage the jets. And then when we drain it, water's raining down onto the first floor.
That's fun. It's like a water park.
Wasn't there like a sticky note on one that was like don't use or something? Or it was for Gordon.
See, something's wrong with me, because if I saw that, I'd be like, why not?
They had a pre-listing inspection. Gordon may have had one that said do not use, but he didn't use it.
Sticky note.
But the last one.
End up in the report, like, we don't know
the last one,
about this. Good luck.
And there probably will be a question, but the last one that happened to, it was Gordon, and the seller had a pre-listing inspection. In that pre-listing inspection, it said did not test due to seller stating that it was broken. Ooh. But they never told anybody. So when we came for the inspection, they never told us that there was a pre-listing inspection done. They never told the buyer's agent or us not to use the jetted tub, but they knew it was a defect.
And they didn't disclose.
They did disclose it. So when we did the testing, it rained down onto the first floor.
And you know the insurance company was like, hold on.
The other issue was with that is this happened, I don't know, Wednesday, Thursday, whatever, Friday. Gordon called the listing, the sellers, or maybe they came home, whatever, and they were fine. Like, they wasn't mad at all. Like, yeah, we knew that was an issue, whatever. Well, the deal fell through because they weren't willing to make the repairs per the proper way. Which the proper way was you got to open everything up, you got to dry it, blah, blah, blah. Yep. The buyer said, no, we know that there's other ways you have to do. They're going to naturally dry and then paint it, I think. So then a week later, we get a phone call. Now they're mad because the deal fell apart. Right. And like, who's going to pay for this? We're like, I guess you are. So my thought process was, because they didn't want to file homeowners insurance claim when it happened, they probably waited too long, because now you've got probably mold growth and everything else because you never opened it up. And then homeowners insurance was probably like, when did this happen? And you're calling me now?
Yeah.
So now there's additional damage that would have never happened if they would have done it to begin with.
Correct. So
Interesting.
And that's all in theory. I'm assuming that's what happened.
Yeah.
Right?
So it's funny that you bring a situation like that up, because I'm in a networking group, and our remediation guy presented yesterday, and it's a local company that we use a lot. And he stated that within his dealings with insurance agencies and adjusters, when they can see that like the underwood has completely rotted, they're denying it.
Yeah, because you waited.
Because you waited.
Yeah, it's too much time.
It's too much time. So, they're not going to pay for all this extra work because you didn't open it up, and they're just going to deny it. You have, as a homeowner, you have to help maintain your home and do anything that is reasonable to maintain the upkeep of it. So if you know that you have a koi fish pond in your ceiling, you need to open it up.
Yeah.
And you have to dry it out.
Yeah.
I mean, water is the most scariest thing, when it comes to a home. And I say it's scarier than fire because you can see fire.
Right.
You cannot see water in the walls. You cannot see mold. You can, but if you don't know it's there.
It's a latent defect until you open it up. And
you
Sidney's
open
not
it up.
going in here opening up everybody's walls.
No. Can you imagine paying a drywall to run around after Sidney?
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's my new gig.
That's
There
right.
you go. That's how we retire, boys.
Side hustle there. I'll
there
just
you go.
follow you
There you
around with some drywall and we'll, that's like having a hole in the roof and not putting up a tarp.
Yeah.
That's just exactly and just letting it rain into the bedroom.
And, the rabbit hole of that is, it's not cheap to properly do it.
No.
Because the dehumidifiers, the dryers, all that stuff, if you're calling, unless you're going to Home Depot, renting all that stuff yourself, to call a restoration company to do that, you're in the thousands,
But if the sooner you do it, the cheaper it's going to be.
Correct.
Yes.
And there's a lot of local companies that can get to you within hours.
Yeah.
And so it's just, yes, it can be a little expensive, but now that it's a known issue, you're not going to get another buyer.
No.
Well, and isn't it that I think it's within 24 hours, mold spores can start to grow as soon as moisture is introduced.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you're leaving it over time, we got a real big problem.
Yeah, as long as you have the right conditions, it takes less than 24 hours for mold to start to grow.
Yeah, and if you're doing it at home with Home Depot stuff, you're not getting your air tested.
No.
And Sidney, is a home inspection going to cover mold? Just your standard old home inspection?
It does not. We are not required to report on the presence of mold.
I get so many phone calls about that, which I'm like, I kind of like that people will call me about that, because in the agreements themselves, it says that we're not required to do that. So people will call and be like, what do you mean? What is this about? So I'm like, oh, you're reading
read it.
Yeah. You actually looked at the contract.
You get a $5 Starbucks gift card for reading your paperwork. Thank you.
I'm so proud. But then I go on to be like, if it's obvious, they're going to put it in there.
Right.
But if
it's in the walls,
obvious,
we don't know.
Yeah, exactly. They can't go around and tear your house up.
As much as I wish they could sometimes.
Right.
That'd be great.
We're covering our butts.
Yeah, exactly. No, good
I'm
info.
sure your insurance proprovider
appreciates
that. Yeah.
You got any more questions?
I don't actually. Thank you so much. I was very much looking forward to this conversation and getting a lot of these questions answered, especially because so many of my clients and even myself, like I said, I've been doing this 8 years full time, and insurance is still such an intimidating thing on your largest asset, and you don't know what you don't know, and unfortunately you don't start to learn things until usually something's going wrong. So ideally this will help get ahead of that, and you can find somebody to partner with who will help you get to these things and understand the process before it's too late.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me. It's been
man. How do people get a hold of you?
You can reach out. So we've got our direct line at work, 804-739-1800. I'm extension 1013. I'm the only Nate there, so you can't miss me. We've got our website, riceinsurance.com. And then just remember, my name's Nate, and I make insurance great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank you, guys.